Welcome to another episode of Talks with Tech Leaders. So today I'm really excited to have my first female guest on the podcast. So Hannah, thank you for joining me today. And would you mind just giving a bit of an intro to yourself?
Yes, so I'm Hannah. I'm currently a Chief Technology Officer, CTO. This is my second role as a CTO, and I've been a CTO for nearly 3 years now. I started my career at the age of 18 joining the Royal Navy, where I was an oceanographer and meteorologist and kind of was more involved in kind of data and data analysis. I then kind of left the Navy in 2008 and embarked on a career in the education sector. And that's kind of where I started to grow my skills and knowledge around different areas of IT and then into software development. I actually became involved in software development quite late in my career, 2017, where I became kind of the head of IT services for a large college group, and then since moved into kind of more CTO role with more. I think what I really wanted to do was build amazing software for the education sector. That's where I kind of started my dream into becoming a CTO.
Brilliant. And so I'd say, I guess your journey and everything is quite unique because, as you mentioned, you've been in the Navy. I was just curious in terms of, I ask a lot of the guests on here, like, when did they first get into development? And they'll probably share stories of, like, when they were 8-year-old and they had, like, a coding book, or, they've got a computer and they really want to, like, break it down and fix it and things like that. What was your sort of, I guess, early ideas in terms of what you wanted to do when you were older, and I guess what prompted you to go into the Navy as well?
So actually, I really wanted to be a pilot. And I wanted to be a pilot in the Navy, which I know is a bit bizarre because it's not the Air Force, but the Navy does have helicopters and planes too. So that's kind of where I got to. But I started my A-levels and decided that academia wasn't really for me. And actually, I thought that getting into work would be better. So I couldn't join the Navy as a pilot because I didn't have A-levels and a degree. So I decided to join as a meteorologist and oceanographer because I was really interested in science and thought science was where my career would go. I think it was when I was in there and then obviously leaving, I realised actually that I learned a lot about data transformation and how large sets of data and how to look at data and analyse it, that was transferable, and I didn't realise that at 18. You don't realise that at 18 when you're joining the Royal Navy. So I think software dev never really entered my mind at that point, and didn't until much later on in my career.
Would you say, was there much opportunity around that? I mean, were you aware of software development as a career? Did you feel like at that time there were people coming into schools, colleges, talking about that and how you can have a career in it or anything like that?
Not then. I will say I'm 43 now, so it was a long time ago when I joined the Navy. So there wasn't much there at the time. And I even remember when I was doing my GCSEs, it was either IT or something else, whereas I actually think everyone should do IT. I think nowadays everyone should have IT as part of their core kind of skill set. Yeah. So at the time, no, and I don't ever remember anyone coming into school discussing what IT roles were out there, let alone software development.
Yeah, okay. And then, so you worked for Newcastle College Group. Was that your first entry into education, or was there any other company?
I did have one previous to that, which was a private training provider called Alicia Training, and I kind of was more kind of an account, like assistant, kind of looking after accounts for private sector training. But I did start kind of a spell in process improvement and management of data again. I always seem to end up somewhere where there was something needed fixing, processes or data generally. And then from there I moved into Newcastle College Group I looked after the School of Construction, looked after their data, and then moved through and got promoted in different areas. And for the main part, until 2016, it was around process improvement and data. And it was only then when I stepped into a role that was within the IT department, that's when I started picking up the different elements, software dev being part of that.
Yeah. And then did you progress to like an IT manager, that sort of level at Newcastle College Group?
Yeah, so I entered the IT department as head of BI and then it was decided that I would then pick up security, infrastructure, service desk and software dev. So that was 2017. I became the head of IT services for a large college group. So my first kind of role in IT was looking after 2,500 staff and 60,000 students. It seems quite scary now when I think about it. Yeah. But I love a challenge, and I will learn and pick things up. And I had a really good mentor and a really good boss at the time, who told me that I had a good team around me, I would learn it. He had every faith in me. And he really did push me, actually.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be a CTO if it wasn't for him, I don't think.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I was going to touch on mentors later on, but it's good that, you mentioned someone already. So it's great because it seems like you did a lot of stuff with data, and then that's got you into like a business intelligence type position.
Yeah.
You've then obviously progressed to management. You've learned more different departments, I guess, of IT and software. And then that has then essentially put you in the position where you're in today as a CTO. And it was great having that chat with you earlier because you actually said to me that I'm not a developer. And then I was like, quite surprised because I'd say maybe almost every CTO that I've spoken with on the podcast has come from a development background. So I thought we'd be able to get some really interesting insights in terms of how, I obviously say you're still technical because you know a lot of like BI data and a lot of technologies, but also I guess seeing it from like a business point of view. So I'm just keen to discuss what sort of things you feel may be different to maybe a CTO from a development background that you and maybe some of the challenges you may have found or some of the obviously successes you've had with that. So when you joined Learning Curve Group, was that when you became a CTO?
It was, yes. So just prior to that, it was the start of the pandemic, I became the director of IT at Newcastle College Group, and that was overseeing everything end to end, like end user computing all the way through to building software. And I remember at the time when my boss was leaving and said, you should apply to be a director. And I was like, but I've only actually looked after IT for 2-3 years. I'm still quite new. And he said, what's different about you, Hannah, is that you run it from a business point of view. He said, you've got all the technical expertise across this team. You always approach it, what's best for the business. And he said, that's a trait that I don't see very often in many candidates. And I said, well, I've always believed that the business is the priority. You could build great software, but if you don't understand how that's going to impact a business or how it's going to enhance a business, then I think you will fail. So I was kind of that's a bit of a different mindset. And I think at the time I thought, well, am I good enough to be a CTO or even a director of IT at that point? Am I good enough to be that director level? And will the team come along with me? Bear in mind they'd had quite a technical director before that. And thankfully it was successful. And over the 2 years I did some amazing projects. And then Learning Curve came up to be the CTO. And I was sad to leave my other role because I'd built that great team. We'd done some great projects. But what I really wanted to do was build software. So I had obviously purchased lots of education software, and I wanted to become somebody who could create that, knowing the business inside out, understanding how education works, understanding what the nuances are. And I think with that, then we were able to create a great team at Learning Curve and then create really good education software, which is now being sold.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think by using software, like you said, you'd have been responsible for looking at assessing all the different technologies and tools because there's so many things out there that then you're able to take those ideas along, which is great. So when you joined Learning Curve Group, how big was the dev team, and did you have any imposter syndrome or any sort of reservations of, can I do this and can I manage just like a software team whose like sole focus is to, develop software?
Yeah, when I got in there, it was very small at the time. I think there was just two or three people there, and it was a view that we would look to grow the software development team. And so we did grow the software development team. And when I left, there was 5. I'm trying to think back 5, and like different skill sets. So making sure we had the front end, back end, make sure we had all kind of complementary skills. We even got a graduate to come in, and that was amazing. He was phenomenal. He's still there now, so he's worked his way up now and is now up his graduate phase, which is great. So yes, it was. I don't think I've ever had imposter syndrome from being at Learning Curve Group. I think sometimes I would say to my principal dev, I was like, I wish I was as technical as you. And he went, Hannah, you're so technical, though. You know stuff that I don't know in different areas that complements us to be able to develop. So I'm quite open about how I feel sometimes about kind of, I might not get that or I might not understand that. But I think because we've got a team that's complementary, that's what makes it work.
Yeah. And how big is the team there? Or how big was the team as you grew up through the years now?
Yeah, it's not that big really, considering I think there's only 5 or 6 there now.
Yeah.
But they do all pull together, and I think they're a good team because they also think business like me. So I drive that when I recruit, which we'll come on to. I think is that's how I look for skill sets that drive businesses forward.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess what would you say maybe some of the strengths are of being, having a focus on the business side of things rather than the technical, and where do you see that can be sometimes be an advantage as well?
Yeah. So I think the advantage is that I can pretty much say yes or no to development requests because I know whether they are going to impact the business or whether they're going to impede the business or whether I think there's somebody's got some idea that's just way out there that's never going to work, and I can articulate that really well by learning the business bottom up. I think you need to do that, and then you're not off. Your devs aren't then off doing things that they're never going to see a return on, and that can be demoralising for devs, right? So they've been working a year on something, and then someone's like, no, actually, it's not the right thing. So we are quite an agile team. I know that's a word people talk about a lot, agile, but that is how it is, and I do think it works, and we have those open conversations with the business. I think I'm lucky enough where I've been able to work quite closely with the CEO and CFOs to make sure we're all aligned and drive that forward. So I do think it stops some of the software devs going off in a way that's not going to impact the business.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my next question, actually about do you think that then again that's an advantage because then you're going to be more aligned with like the CEO, the CFO in terms of like what direction the business is going. With that though, how important do you think it is for the development team to know that as well? And I guess do you feel like because you've got a good relationship, I guess, with the CEO and the CFO that you may be able to communicate that more effectively with maybe somebody else who is maybe focused a lot more on the tech than the business side of things, and naturally there can be some conflict there as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. So my devs get involved in lots of meetings, and I will sit my devs in front of the CEO as well. The first time that can be quite scary, but I do put them in meetings where we discuss openly development requirements and the way the business is moving, and it gives them that real understanding of actually what is driving the business and what do we need to do. And I mean, those software devs are the clever people, not me. So they go off and think, I've got these ideas, and we'll come back, and I think part of it, they get excited by it as well, having that involvement and knowing that they are transforming the business. I think that encourages them and motivates them.
Yeah.
So I think everyone being aligned and getting to be part of that journey is really important. I suppose I've never really worked anywhere where it's kind of based on a ticket system and you take a ticket and you work on it and you put it in. That's not how I've ever worked, generally because I've always had smallish teams who need to be able to move from one thing to another. So I think it's an advantage for the devs in my team that they get to experience kind of what's driving the business.
Yeah, oh great. Did you fall into management, or was it something that you focused on sort of achieving? Did you think that you'd be a manager naturally, or has it sort of come along as you've progressed through the years as well?
I think I pushed for it quite early on actually in my career, and I've always wanted to manage teams. I actually love managing teams. It can be tricky sometimes, it can, but I do enjoy it, and I've grown some really great teams, and people still talk to me from previous jobs and ask me for advice and things like that. So I did push it. I started managing people probably when I was about 19, 20, kind of in supervisory position. And I was quite young so in the military, kind of middle level management, I was quite young, like 22, 23. But I did push it because I realised I think a key strength of mine is developing people and kind of getting people on a journey and bringing people along. So I have pushed for it. I am really ambitious as well. So I have pushed for it. And I do like it when I get to see people exceed kind of their expectations as well and achieve things they might never have thought possible. So I do enjoy that. So management has always been in there. Yeah. So
you mentioned earlier about a mentor as well. So was that somebody that was at Newcastle College Group, or was there mentors you had obviously in the military as well that sort of helped you progress along your career?
Yeah. So I think I've been lucky to have some really good bosses in the past. There was one in the military. He was really good, and actually I was going to leave the Navy a lot earlier than I did, and he asked me what he could do to help me stay, and I said, well, I wanted to teach new recruits, so I went off for a couple of years teaching new recruits, and he felt that was great for my development, and it taught me so much about coaching, motivation, leadership, particularly of young people who had come into the military trying to escape some of the things that happen in their lives, or people who are a bit later on who wanted to develop and have a new career. So that was great. So he taught me a lot then when I was younger about management and leadership. And then from a technical point of view, or managing tech team, I had another good boss who he championed me all the way through. He said to me when I interviewed for the first time, he said he knew I didn't have all the skills, but there was just something there. And he said, you just had the real passion. I could just tell you had the passion to drive it through. And he took a chance on me, he really did, and never stopped pushing for me until he left.
Yeah.
And even when I applied for the CTO role at Learning Curve, he's the person I rang to say, I've seen this job, what do you think? And he said, you should do it. He said, you've got it within you, you can do it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, brilliant. I mean, I'm just thinking back to when I had another guest on the podcast, and he was talking about when he hired someone, he said the same thing. They didn't have all the technical skills, but he could just see that particular candidate just really wanted it. And she's been brilliant in her role as well for the past couple of years. He said, where she's actually like a leader as well now. So I think, I guess for anyone who has that doubt or thinks that they might not hit every skill in a job spec or everything, to still, go for it, and maybe their passion for wanting that job could still shine through and make up for maybe, because skills you can pick up and learn, but sometimes, passion and drive isn't anything that you can teach. It's always within someone.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Did you, when going into management, I think it's great because I've not really spoken to anybody who has been in the military, and I appreciate you probably learned a lot in terms of like management and skills and development throughout the years. When you started managing tech teams, was there any particular training or any sort of books or any sort of learning that you did that you felt was really useful to help you in becoming a better manager? Or was it sort of learned on the job and had a good mentor that was sort of helping you, coach you through that as well?
Yeah, I learned on the job, and I'd say I probably did research a bit to understand kind of different technologies, to understand that, and understand kind of what the education sector was doing and where we would go. But I do think a lot of it, so within the military, I think when you reflect back when you're so young and you're 18 and early 20s, I think I took for granted the training that they give you. So as you got promoted, you went away and did leadership management training. You were taken away from your day-to-day and given really excellent leadership management training. And whilst it's a very different way, like the military is so different to software dev, there is that coaching, there is that motivation, there is that let's talk problems through, let's see what we can do. And so I think there was some of that I could transfer, and then obviously the mentor with the technical side, and also building the team around you with, like I said, the skills, having that team. I'm only as good as my team, so you have to really make sure you recruit the right people and work closely with them and build those relationships. Yeah.
And how do you go about building like a positive team culture in the teams that you manage?
So I have a very open culture, I think. I would say I attend meetings with them, I go and talk to them. I do have a lot of two-way communication, and I'm really hands-on. Again, that's quite different to some CTOs. Some CTOs might want to be more strategic, but I'm very operational. I like to know what's going on, because if I don't know, I can't help them. We can't plan with them. And again, it is a small team, and again, it's making sure they've got that focus and drive there. So it is a very open culture with me, and I think that's resonant of the jobs that I work with as well. As I said, obviously at Learning Curve Group, I would put my devs in front of the CEO. It's rare that would happen in a big in a big tech company, but I think it's kind of the openness that I enjoy, those values and culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing that there's, more recently there's a bigger push on like allyship and diversity within organisations. And even recently I did some research for a client of mine where they wanted me to sort of bring some data in terms of how many female developers there are in the Northeast, and my findings were quite damning really. I think there's only 6.5% female developers in the Northeast compared to like 93.5% male. So that itself is obviously a challenge when presenting CVs to companies, because there's less of a pool to send them from. Well, do you think those findings are like accurate in terms of like your experience, and what are some of the things you think we can do to help make that number larger with, having more female developers in the local area?
Yeah, I think it probably is true. I've really struggled to recruit females into software dev roles, and in general across any IT roles. at Newcastle College, we were lucky. We had a graduate who joined us, and I believe she's still there actually, and she was a great developer. And there was another girl who did progress from the service desk into become a junior software developer. So I've seen little pockets of it, but generally, if I go out to recruit a software developer, I've probably had one or two each time I've gone out to recruit. If I'm lucky, sometimes none. They're all male generally, so it is hard. And we do try again. I do like to obviously advocate to be a kind of women in tech and get more women into technology, whether it is software dev or whether it is another avenue of IT. But I do think what we're not doing is getting into schools early enough to really talk about what software development is. And I think we talk a lot about we'll teach our children to code. We have coding classes or coding lessons, but actually what does that mean in longer term, and how does that kind of work in the jobs market? Because even as young, I mean, my boy's 8, and he talks about what he wants to be when he's older. I mean, he wants to be a Formula One racing driver, but I think he's probably going to be about 6'5", so that's not going to be his career. But he's obsessed in Minecraft, and we talk a lot about coding and about how that works, and sometimes why it kicks him out because he gets upset when someone happens to the server the other side, and he's trying to understand it all. And obviously, so I'm advocating for him, like, there's these careers out there, you can do all these other things you can do. But I don't think we really talk to our children, or schools don't talk to the children about the different careers there are and what actually software development could do.
Yeah. I mean, do you think there's any reason why a female shouldn't be able to do the job as well as a male in development?
No, not at all. And I've seen it. I've seen the girl that we employed at Newcastle College Group. She was amazing. She really was. When she came to interview and she brought her dissertation through, you could just see how she was so enthusiastic, and she was a really great find. So I felt quite lucky. Yeah. Oh,
brilliant. What do you think then we could maybe do better? So I think you've mentioned maybe not getting into schools early enough. Is there anything that you feel maybe could be helpful in doing that, by not just getting in early enough, but anything else that we could do to maybe make it more attractive to females?
I think it's about what, again, going back to the point about what is it the job's offering. So I think a lot, and actually, and this goes for males too, now when I'm interviewing now, people want to know what is it that I'm doing that's making a difference. And I think if we could sell that element of it, and that you're not just going to be sat behind a desk coding, what else is it that it will bring? What other skills will I get from that? And I think that's when I interview, that's kind of how I try and sell a job, is that this isn't just a software dev job. You are part of this company. You are. And I think that would help. I think on both sides, really, males and females. And I do think just, talking about what the jobs are out there that they've got, because there are many out there. Like, people think, well, if you're a software dev, you just sit in creating software to sell. But there's internal software development projects that you need to be done. There's all sorts of different kind of roles you could do. So,
yeah, okay. I want to talk a little bit about leadership as well. So, do you think you've got a leadership style, and do you think that works well for you, or maybe how would you describe yourself as a leader?
No, I've been thinking about this. I don't think I have a typical leadership style. I think it depends on who I'm working with, what their situation is at that time, and it will vary. I do have a very kind of coaching kind of style of leadership, and maybe more a bit of a servant leadership, because I think we're all in this together as a team. Like I said earlier, I'm only successful if my team is successful. So I have to work as hard for them as they work as hard for me. And I think that's really important. And it's not all about me just dictating what we do. They have to know that I'm on the journey with them. That's how I feel as a leader, that if we're all on this journey, you'll get the best out of them. Yeah,
okay. And I want to talk about conflict in teams as well.
Yeah.
But I want to add an extra sort of question to this in terms of how do you deal with conflict? Do you think conflict, sorry, it's going to be 3 questions. How do you deal with conflict? Do you think conflict can be useful in teams? And I guess the extra caveat I want to ask was, do you think by being a female leader that you've had any challenges with that, or do you think that it doesn't matter? So I've maybe asked a lot of questions in one, but fine. I hope that makes sense.
So I always deal with conflict head on. I think, so there's a difference between, I always say to my team, if you don't think what I'm saying is right, or if you think it's wrong, you challenge me, and we have that open debate. And there's no one's going to get in trouble for that. And that's really important to have that discussion. If there's conflict in a team, I think you can have healthy conflict, and that you will always get people who disagree on something. That's happened. That does happen, doesn't it? We are humans. We all have our own values and our opinions, but it's how you deal with that. And I think leaving it to fester is not the right way. So I will always deal with it head on, talk to the right people, get the right people in. So challenge. I think healthy, open challenges is really important in a team, particularly when you're trying to build products and sell them. For me personally, internally, I would say the conflict comes with people's priorities and what they believe is a priority across the business.
Yeah.
And it's managing that quite openly and being transparent. And I think that goes back to the point that if you understand the business, you can then articulate the reasons why and what's happening. So I think from that point of view, there's not there. I think not so much conflict, but more challenge, I think, from externals. So when you're right, there's not many females, particularly at this level. So I do go to a lot of I think of the word now, sorry. I've lost my train of thought. I do go to a lot of conferences, networking events, and I am the only female there, and I think that's can be like there's some challenge there. And I have been on calls when people have spoken down to me, like, well, you're so young, and what do you know? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm not that young. I'm actually older than you think, and I've actually created really good software, and I've got a really good team, and it's just being able to stand up. And I think sometimes others should stand up to those. I think it's really, but it is a difficult thing when you're on those calls and people are making those comments. So I think that will change. I do. Like, I think that is fading out now. I don't see it as much as I did 2017 when I first joined. Kind of a technical, kind of more technology areas. But now, I think it will change. Yeah,
I mean, I think I was saying to you earlier that I only know maybe a handful of CTOs that are female in the Northeast. So, hoping that number improves and there'll be less of, like you said, being talked down to. But that's why I was just keen to ask the question in terms of, like, have you felt a difference in terms of being like a female leader to a male leader when there has been either conflict or any challenges? Just thought I'd ask that. But, obviously you've explained it well.
Yeah, no, I think men and women will handle situations like differently. I do, and I think it's great to have a complement of skills across the leadership level. Actually, I think having both male and female across it is a great balance to have. So
I think diversity in any team is really useful because everyone has different experiences, different ideas, and we all do things based on our own experiences. So some people are less, risk adverse. Some like to take risks, and it'll be probably similar in software where a lot of people like to try and do the next shiny thing or the latest tech, whereas others are probably a bit more safer. And it's trying to sort of bring all those ideas together and work together. But I can certainly see how that works in leadership as well. So I just want to talk a little bit about recruitment. So I like to have a little segment in the podcast because I'm a recruiter, obviously everyone knows. So I like to sort of give some value to not just sort of software managers, but also either junior developer, graduates, mid-level or senior, anyone who's potentially looking to move jobs or would like to improve their chance of landing a new job when it comes to interviews and preparation. So I guess you've been involved in recruiting interviews and things like that. What sort of things do you like to see in CVs or in an interview when candidates apply to work for yourselves?
Yeah, so I've talked a lot about the business. One of the questions I always ask every candidate is, how do you feel this role is going to add value to this organisation? And I think that's really important. From that question, you can really understand what the motivation is and to understand kind of have they done a bit of research into what they would be doing in the business. And I think that's really key for me. I also like to understand how they like to work, because I do get that I'm again very different to a lot of CTOs where they are out in the business, they are talking to lots of people. Now, some people don't like that, and that's fine. That there's a place, there's a job for people that want to just sit and code, not talk to anybody. But that's not my team, and it would be unfair for me to put them in that situation, knowing that they would really not like it, and it just wouldn't be a great working environment for them. So I really get to understand the person when it comes to it. But that's really important to me, is how would they work within the team? How would they work within the business? And do they really understand what they're going to be doing to change or to transform the business? Yeah.
And what would you say some of the maybe common pitfalls you sometimes see in applications as well, where it's probably like, that, okay, it's almost like a trigger of like, this person isn't going to be successful?
I don't think I've ever seen... I think I've seen where people really undersell themselves. So so this isn't a software dev recruitment one, but I recruited someone into our IT team, and I read their CV, and I was talking to my recruiter. I said, they're just not. I just can't see anything in there that lends themselves to this. And they said, you need to speak to this person. I said, I've been interviewing for like weeks at this point. I said, I can't see anything in there. And anyway, I trusted the recruiter. So I said, right, okay, I'll interview. Well, I'm so glad I did. And I'm so glad that recruiter pushed me, because actually the CV didn't reflect kind of the skill set. When you ask the questions, like, so tell me some projects, and you kind of got under the detail, it was amazing. And actually now their career is flying, and I'm so glad that recruiter pushed me, because I would have never known what a gem I had in that person. So it is. And I think from looking at software dev CVs, I think my issue is that a lot of them say they've worked in all these technologies, like every technology you could ever think of, but there's no practical examples or just something in there that says, and I did this in this business, and this is what I did there, and this was the outcome. Yeah. So I think they focus, and again, maybe that's because I'm business focused, and I like to see kind of, you can work in .NET, you can work in React, great, but what have you done with it? Like, tell me what you've done. Yeah.
So, that's something that I've learned more recently, where I do ask them to, when I give CV advice or cover letter advice, I do say, in there, try and talk about like what impact that had on the business and what you were doing as part of that team, not just I worked on this particular thing. Like, talk about like what your role was within that, what was the outcome, or what were you trying to achieve, and then what did you achieve? Was there a big uptake? Like, if it's a SaaS, was there a big uptake in people? Was there less, downtime? Did it generate more revenue for the business? All these different examples. I think if you can mention that in a CV rather than just saying I worked with C# on, like a, business management tool, that doesn't explain or give a story about anything. So there has to be a bit of detail in the CV, but also at interview, when I've spoken to hiring managers, they like it when, there's a bit of storytelling. Again, some examples of like, what was your role? What was your responsibility? You can talk about the team and yourself, you can talk, and that's how you can, I guess, sell yourself at interview. Yeah,
I would agree. I think it really is important that you see kind of what they've developed and what they've done and the impact it's had. That's what we look for. Yeah. And so that I would ask those questions. Yeah.
Can you give me any examples of someone that you've hired that's like really flourished, and maybe what qualities did they bring to the role that enabled them to progress through their career quite quickly?
Yeah. So I met my principal developer now. I've known him for not now, the Learning Curve group. I've known him for a long time actually. And I worked with him at Newcastle College Group, and he was not just a software dev, but at the point he was a software dev, and he really helped me actually learn quickly, and he learned from me about kind of how we manage projects and move things forward, and between us we built a very good relationship and kind of worked well together. And over the years I've watched him really develop. Now, he would consider himself like a full stack developer, and he can pretty much turn his hand to anything, which is why I think he's quite phenomenal, really. And I tell him that as well. I do tell him sometimes. He doesn't believe me, but he is. And so he always says to me, you've really helped me learn about management and leadership. And if you speak to his developers that he has now under him, they're like, oh, he's such a good line manager. He really spends time with us to understand the code, and I wouldn't have progressed as far as I have if it wasn't for him. So I've really seen him come on that journey with the kind of leadership and kind of mentoring and coaching his own team, which is a great skill to have at that level, as well as still being able to code, which he really loves. That's his favourite thing, the coding. But he has really come a long way.
Yeah. I mean, I speak to CTOs who still like to dabble in coding and do a bit of hands-on coding as well. So I think it's something that sometimes doesn't leave you if that's what you've progressed your career doing. Yeah. What are your thoughts on tech tests? And I appreciate when you've worked with a few different companies, naturally, each company tends to have like different recruitment process and tech test process. Yeah. But do you think, I guess initially, what are your thoughts on them? Do you think that they are useful in our industry? And what would you say is like a good example and maybe a bad example that you've seen?
So I do very little testing, and even when I work with my principal developer, when we worked before recruiting, we've talked a lot about testing and whether it is beneficial or not beneficial. For our grads, we never test. They're straight out of university. Yeah. We interview them based on kind of what they're interested in, what they want to develop, where they see their career. We talk about what was their favourite thing at university, what did they really enjoy, and again, it's like they've never worked out. Like a lot of them, they might have had placements, but we want them to come in. They might not have all the finished. They're not the finished article. So we kind of get to understand them as a person and whether they would fit in the team, whether we think they've got it in them to develop, and that's how we would look at that. Others, we might do a basic test to see kind of where they are. But I do think if you're a skilled interviewer and people talk about what they've been working on, looking at a CV, I think you can understand or get out of them whether they are the right person or got the right skill set. So I do think some testing has its place. I think that there'll be some areas where you might want to test, but it's not my preferred way. And I always recruit the person first and technical second, because I think you can teach a lot of the technical. And we've made some, I think I would say, some bold decisions in the past, and some of them have paid off, some of them haven't.
Yeah.
But I think the person is really important. They have to fit in the team. They have to be a team player, and they have to want to drive transformation or the business forward, whatever we're working on in software dev. So,
yeah, okay. We had just a little chat before the podcast, and I think obviously we're both parents, so I thought and we've spoken about, what life was like pre-COVID with work and what it's like now. So I probably know what you're going to say about this, but when it comes to like flexibility to, hybrid home working, I mean, recently I've been seeing a lot more articles and a lot more companies that I work with that are wanting to get the developers back in the office, either 3 days a week, 4 days a week. And previously they were happy for them to work remotely. What are your sort of thoughts on it? And I guess, do you sense that's happening as well? And just your overall thoughts on home working and whether that's probably been a good thing or not?
Yeah, so I think there does seem to be a lot of articles about the minute, doesn't there, about businesses, not just software dev, but generally about getting people back in the office. I do think it's really important that the team do come in, but I do work quite flexibly, and I do think a hybrid approach is best, and it works best for both parties. I do think, particularly when employing graduates, I think they need to have that face-to-face interaction and be there. I think starting a career purely on Teams is not ideal.
Yeah.
But it does have its place, and we get the teams in when they need to come in. If they need to get head down coding, it doesn't matter where they sit, does it? But I do think they need to come, because I like teams to be business focused. It's good for them to come in the office. I, myself, being a single parent, the flexibility for me is really important. I do like to pick up my child at the end of the day, and I think that's really important. And I think you can still be successful and do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really shown from the pandemic, is that you don't have to be 9 to 5 sat at your desk, that there is that flexibility and it can work, and you can achieve amazing things and continue to be a good parent too.
Yeah.
And not have those guilty feelings when you can't pick them up for a day. So
yeah, no, I agree. I think especially like the face-to-face and learning from others. So, in my industry, when I've worked at the start of my career, you learn from others that are doing well, excelling, and you can see that a lot more than you can at home, So, and I always get major team fatigue myself. So if I've done a couple of back-to-back Teams or Zooms, I'm just absolutely exhausted. Whereas, when you're around people, you just sort of have a bit more energy, I think. And it's useful, I think. I think obviously it is different. And again, that's probably something you might be able to gauge from when you're interviewing whether, somebody is, if they would work well in that setting as well, in a hybrid setting rather than a remote setting. I do speak to some developers who just want to work remotely and feel like now, because for the last 6-7 years they've got used to it, they've got a really good setup at home, and they don't feel the need to come in. So I guess it is each to their own, but then I guess it's up to the business of like gauging whether what policy and what environment they've got would work best for their candidates.
Yeah, and I think following the pandemic, and I've recruited since, it's been a real mixed bag. So when we came out of the pandemic, it was everyone can work from home, but then I never really got anybody applying that was further than the Northeast, really. So it was quite interesting. I thought we would get a more pool of candidates to recruit from, and in fact, we didn't really. And I have recruited purely remote workers. I have, and they've done the job. I just sometimes, I think for me, it has to be that I do like to see people. I do like to make sure they're all right. And sometimes on Teams, that's not always easy.
Yeah.
And make sure that's that. And I think the other bit is I think early on in the pandemic, when everything was on Teams, one of the things that I noticed really quickly was where we had quite an open plan office. Because I was at Newcastle College Group, that if people were discussing an issue and some would say, well, that's because I've done this, and then you would get to the bottom of the problem a lot quicker, because people would overhear those conversations. When you're sat at home, you don't overhear those conversations like, oh, someone's made a change on the network, which has now taken down this part of the software. So you don't hear those things.
Yeah.
So that's sometimes takes a bit longer to resolve those issues. So I do think it's good to get people in. And it's why actually I quite enjoy managing across the different parts of IT and software dev, because they all interlink at some point.
Yeah.
And being able to get them together and problem solve is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to somebody recently who I work with, and they want to make the role hybrid because they feel like, the employee was struggling with some things, but they weren't able to see that, and they were maybe putting on a bit of a brave face. Whereas, like, if they felt they were maybe in the office, they might have been able to identify that. But I appreciate, every company's different and everyone has their reasonings. So when it comes to like, I wanted to go back to the developers and your thoughts on maybe like continuous learning. So is that something that you encourage in your team, and what sort of benefits do you think can come from your software developers looking to continuously learn and enhance their skills?
Oh, I think it's really important. I do. I think, well, anybody who works from a software dev point of view in any technology, they need to continually move forward. Everything changes. And I think it's really important. And the graduate developer that I hired at Learning Curve Group, we set him off on a little AI project, which is quite small internally, and he was really excited, and he'd enjoyed his AI module at uni.
Yeah.
So we set him off, and he developed this little app, and it was great, and he demonstrated it across the whole of the group, and everyone was kind of bought in. And for him, it was really great that he had gone away. He would let him research it himself. Yeah, he'd obviously got the support of the principal developer, but we set him some goals he needed to do, and he got there, and he learned that, and now he's thinking about, okay, well, what can we do next?
Yeah.
And I think if you could let them continually learn and give them the time and the space to learn, I think that's really important, that they will come up with really innovative ideas. And I mean, I used to often sit at the night, and my principal developer would message and say, I've had this really great idea. And then we would be on chatting about what idea, and we'd talk backwards and forwards. Or I would message him and go, I've had a great idea. Do you think we could just do? And then, so I think it does breed that kind of innovation, that kind of wanting to push things forward, and curiosity as well. And I do make sure my team have time. So they go to like some of the Ignite sessions, they go to, and if they say, I want to go to this, I'll be like, right, let's have a look how I make it work in the diary. And sometimes that's a hard ask. I think, if I think back to when I recruited graduates, I said to the CEO at the time, I said, you're going to have to give me time with them.
Yeah.
You can't expect them to deliver what we've got the senior mid developers delivering. We're going to have to grow them. They've just come out of uni. They've not really worked in a production environment as such. And that's hard, but being open and honest, I think, again, to say that really kind of breeds that trust between me and the board to say, well, actually, we're going to move on a journey, and this is a journey. And like I said, that grad now is a mid-level developer. Like he's really grown, and he's still in the company. So
yeah, it's just like setting expectations, isn't it? And that open communication. And I think that's like really encouraging for any grads or junior developers to know that that they can get the time and they will develop and learn.
Yes.
So I appreciate it. It's very, very complex.
But again, it's not even for a grad. It's not even the software development skills. It's the working skills.
Yeah.
So what I think they don't teach them at uni is how to be in work. Like when you have a meeting invite, you have to accept it or you decline it, or like little things like that, or how to reply to emails. Like those sorts of the softer work skills that I think is missing. Yeah. So that's really important that they learn that as well when they come in.
I think it's very important. When I think back to when I started in recruitment, I would want to ask those questions in terms of like, I've just received this email from this client, like how do I respond to it, and like learning about how to work in environments as well. So that's why I always I'm a big advocate for like trying to get into work as soon as possible. Even if you do like a part-time job in retail or any sort of industry, telesales or anything, just so then you can get an idea of like how to speak to customers, how to be around other work colleagues. So I think things like that's important. But sometimes you may find a grad who hasn't had the opportunity or they've not done that, and then like you said, getting them into just I guess the normal working habits and what works and what doesn't.
And it's important for them as well to build their confidence in the workplace setting as well. I believe working on both sides of their kind of career and making them move in the right direction. Particularly if you're going to work in a team with me. you would be expected to engage with customers, and that can be quite daunting for someone straight out of uni who's going to have to sit with someone quite senior and do scoping or think about what they're going to do and work with kind of business analysts or project managers. That can be quite daunting, can't it?
Yeah.
And it's again making that space like a safe space for them and say, we're here to support you, talk to us, don't worry, ask us anything, and make them feel like they can, and it's not just words coming out of your mouth. That you do make them feel like they've got this team that support them and help them through.
One thing I found, I think that there isn't a lot of companies in the Northeast that do go down the graduate route. A lot of companies that I work with do want mid-level, senior-level developers, but it's encouraging to hear that you've had some really good experiences with graduates. And there are a few, some of the companies like Waterstones, for example, they have like good, graduate scheme, Scott Logic as well. Do you think that companies should, if they maybe don't feel like they've got the capacity, but should they go down that route, provided obviously they can provide the right support as well?
I do. The graduates I've had have really been excited about being in a software development team. And like I've said, I've only had 2 graduates, and they've both done amazing things. And it is about giving them that space to grow, so we've given them small projects to start with, to cut their teeth in really and get them going, to make sure they're working. I do think that we've now seen the progression. Both of them saw the progression, and they're both still within the same companies and still doing amazing things. So I think the proof is in the pudding there, isn't it, that we got them. I think it's really important that when we go back to recruitment and when I interview graduates, I do take time to think about them as a person and what they want in their career and whether it will fit into how we work and what we do. So I think everyone should consider a graduate. I do. I think it's great for the business as well to see that development.
Yeah, perfect. What do you think the future holds for Hannah? What do you have any plans, or are you wanting to sort of continue in the space you're in and continue building great teams that do great work?
Yeah, I know I don't know what's next for Hannah really. It's been I do really enjoy pushing forward with transformations and building great software. So I don't think that will ever leave me. And maybe in a few years' time there might be something else out there. But I think for now a CTO is where I'm at, and see what the future is. But I enjoy it. I absolutely. Do you know what I love? I love when you deliver something to whether it's external company, internal stakeholders, and they go, this is going to change the way we work, or this is going to have a massive impact for the better, obviously for the better. So that's what I love. And I don't think there are many jobs for software dev where it's like that. I think people need to remember that there is what you're doing. As long as you've got the right scope in place and you've got the right drivers behind it, you'll make a difference to somebody's life.
Yeah. I think especially with the industries you've worked in as well, especially like the education sector as well, you're going to be gearing up to do things that will hopefully enhance people's learning capabilities and their future prospects as well. So I think you've probably had, you've been blessed to work in that sort of industry that that you're doing like a positive. So I think that's probably been a good driver for you as well by speaking to you.
Yeah, and I do look for careers I think like that. I couldn't imagine myself, for instance, working in the gambling industry. That just wouldn't fit with my values.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not for everyone. People will work there, and that's fine. But for me, that's not where I would see myself. I do like the social value of where I work. So I think that's really important to me as a person.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Hannah, it's been great speaking to you. As
Thank
I
you
said,
for having me.
First female guest I've had, and I'm hoping to have many more on. But I appreciate you giving me your time and coming down from Gateshead as well. And I'm sure a lot of people will take some value from today. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.